3 Americans are safely home today. They were set free after the largest prisoner exchange with Russia since the end of the Cold War.
The deal is being called a diplomatic triumph, yet critics warn that it was a victory for Russian President Vladimir Putin. CBN's Brody has the story.
The Americans met by the president and vice president at Andrews Air Force Base overnight, arriving after the historic deal. This is the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Their reporter Evan Gershkovich released from Russian prison. His high-profile case has been in the headlines since he was detained in March of 2023. And he was one of 16 prisoners set free in exchange for Russians held in the U.S. and Europe.
I feel great. It's a long time coming. Yeah. So I'm glad to be back.
Former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan is among the 3 Americans back on American soil after he'd spent nearly 6 years in a Russian prison on charges of espionage, arrested while attending a wedding in Russia. Also part of the trade, Russian-American editor Aslu Kurmasheva, along with Vladimir Kara-Murza, a U.S. permanent resident and prominent Russian dissident.
Our alliances make our people safer, and we began to see that again today.
President Biden led a multinational negotiation between the U.S., Germany, Slovenia, Poland, Norway, and Turkey. In addition to the Americans, 6 other Western prisoners, as well as 4 political prisoners and human rights advocates, were set free. And 3 Russians with ties to the late prominent Russian opposition leader, Alexei Navalny.
The deal that made this possible was a feat of diplomacy and friendship.
National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says no money or sanctions were used to confirm the deal. Instead, the prisoners were swapped for spies and a convicted assassin.
It is difficult to send back a convicted criminal to secure the release of an innocent American. And yet, sometimes the choice is between doing that and consigning that person basically to live out their days in prison in a hostile foreign country.
In Moscow, President Putin held a similar welcome ceremony, greeting the Russians while celebrating the return of his people as a win for the Kremlin. Still, many criticize the deal as a victory for Putin. Congressman Michael McCall, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, was grateful the prisoners were set free, but added, quote, "I remain concerned that continuing to trade innocent Americans for actual Russian criminals held in the U.S. and elsewhere sends a dangerous message to Putin that only encourages further hostage-taking by his regime." And the Wall Street Journal editorial page said Mr. Putin has paid no price for imprisoning Mr. Gershkovich beyond bad publicity. At the same time, he has won the release of his spies and an assassin. And former President Donald Trump said he got many hostages back and gave up nothing. But the administration is touting its record of getting hostages released.
This is just an extraordinary testament to the importance of having a president who understands the power of diplomacy and understands the strength that rests in understanding the significance of diplomacy and strengthening alliances.
Amid the celebration of the prisoners' release and the criticism that the deal is a win for Putin, it's clear the problem of how to deal with those who take Americans hostage is far from over and is likely to pose a difficult issue for future presidents. Brody, CBN News.
I think it will make it more difficult for future presidents, and anytime you have a relationship where it's okay for one nation to take hostages and then use those hostages in exchange for convicted criminals, you can't applaud that. But at the same time, welcome home.